Welcome to Coffee Break Blogging, where you'll learn to grow and monetize your blog in short, tactical installments you can use right away. Now here's the next episode in our series. Welcome back to another installment of Coffee Break Blogging, where this isn't just another podcast, it's a full course on building an online business based around blogging from scratch. My name is David Risley, and if you want to catch up with us from the beginning, go over to coffeebreakblogging.com to view the full archives of this course. Okay, so let's get into our topic for today, which is product launches. All right. Product launches, a very sexy topic in the world of online business and internet marketing. They're a very sexy topic because they can result in a lot of sales in a very short amount of time. And if you follow the internet marketing world at all specifically, you've probably heard the stories of the $1 million plus launches, and they are real. They have happened for many more people. You know, I think John Reese was one of the first people to do a 7-figure launch in the internet marketing world, and he did it in a day. He made $1 million in a day. But it went on from there, and since John did it, many others have done it as well. So it's certainly a sexy topic, okay? You can also create a lot of buzz by doing a product launch. You get a lot of people talking about you. It's kind of like in the world of the internet, you're generating press for yourself, and you can get people talking about you, especially if you are launching with the help of affiliates. You can generate a lot of buzz because they're going to be out there talking about you because, let's face it, they're incentivized to do so. Now, but what we're going to be doing today is not so much talking about how to execute a product launch, because that's a pretty big topic. And we call these episodes Coffee Break Blogging for a reason, because we like to keep it kind of short and sweet, the kind of thing you can listen to all over a coffee break. So what we're going to be talking about today is not so much how to do a product launch, but do you really need to do one in the first place? Okay? Do you need to go through all that work of doing a product launch, especially when you're first starting out? I mean, $1 million launch is a ways out there if you're first starting out, okay? It can seem very unrealistic, and I'm not going to sit here and BS you. It probably is unrealistic for most of us, okay? And there's also the other side of a product launch that we have to take into account. First of all, they're very hard to pull off. They really are. Now, it doesn't matter if you're going to do one of these $1 million launches. Chances are you're not. Your average person on the internet, when they do a launch, you might make a few $1,000s. Maybe it'll be a 5-figure launch, and to you that would be a lot of money. But it doesn't really matter. They're still hard to pull off. They're a lot of work. There's a lot of moving parts. Things will inevitably go wrong when you do it. It's just the way the thing works. And there's also a lot of pressure. It adds pressure to the product creation experience. You know, you do this work, you create a product, and now you're sitting there facing the fact that you've got to do a product launch, or at least you think that you need to do a product launch. And it's a lot of pressure. It's also a lot of pressure on the results of that product launch, because if you put a lot of work into doing this product launch, the last thing that you want to have happen is for it to be kind of a flop, because that would be really disappointing. You probably would just want to fold up shop and go home at that point. The other thing to keep in mind is that launches are a lot harder, for obvious reasons, if you don't already have a built-in audience. I mean, look at that. If you don't have a big audience, if you don't have a decent-sized email list, who are you going to launch it to? Okay? Now, you can go out and build the audience for it, and you can, do paid outreach with Facebook ads and maybe even affiliates and guest posting and appearing on podcasts as an interview guest. And there's lots of different things that you can do to bring in that audience. But if you don't have anybody to launch to, it's going to be a really difficult thing to pull off. Okay? Another thing about launches is that when you build up all this buzz over an event, then when that event is over, you're going to see a huge drop in sales. Now, it doesn't even matter if the product literally disappears off the market. I mean, if it disappears off the market, if you pull it down, then obviously your sales will go to zero. But if you decide to leave it out there, you're still going to have some kind of scarcity on that offer, some kind of a deadline. Something's going to have to be taken away in order for the launch to do really well. And so just by the very nature of it, after that deadline goes by, your sales are going to drop off. Now, and there are many stories out there of marketers who have built their business on the product launch model exclusively. And you might hear their tales of the $1 million launch day, but what you don't know is that on the back end of that, they might still be having a hard time paying their bills because all their money came in one big event, and then it just went to nothing after that. And then if you have affiliates, depending on what market you're in, they need their commission. So if you're in the internet marketing space, you're going to typically give away half your money right there. So $1 million launch goes down to $500,000. You might be thinking, well, I can certainly live off of that. Well, you're going to have business expenses and advertising expenses and all the things that would go in to scaling something to that degree. Okay. I don't have to sit here and tell you that there are such a thing as business expenses. So at the end of the day, your actual take home from it's going to be a lot smaller. And then because you don't have those spikes of sales happening, it's like your business is addicted to crack. And if you don't get that next crack hit, that next income hit, you have a hard time paying your bills. And so there are marketers out there who have done nice size launches, and they probably don't live much differently than you do. I don't care what they tell you. Their life looks pretty much like yours. And it's because they were depending on launches and not taking into account evergreen sales that are going to happen all the time. Okay? The last thing I want to mention about the other side of a product launch is that sometimes that launch is more inside of your own head than anywhere else. And what I mean by that is that this is your product. So you view it as a very important thing, but the rest of the world doesn't. Okay. They really don't, they're not following you. They're not, waiting on your every word. They're just not. And so for that reason, if you don't really have what it takes to build up that buzz ahead of time and really build up that anticipation, then the launch is going to be totally inside your own head, and the people who might be on your list are just not really going to care. And for that reason, the launch can totally fall flat. All right. So those are the two sides of a product launch. The good side, which can be quite sexy, and the negative side, which is a very real thing, okay? So when are launches a good thing? I mean, when should you actually go about doing a real product launch? Well, when you have an audience already, that's a really good time to go for it. If you're launching a brand new product and you're unleashing it to the world for the first time, and you have that audience already in place that you can go to, then certainly do a product launch, okay? For sure, do a product launch. Now, the other thing is that when you know the market really well, you know you're delivering something that they need and want, and you've got that time to strategically build that audience first, then what you can do is you can plan ahead. Like you can set your launch for, let's say, 6 months out. And then for that time between now and then, you're basically in outreach mode and you're purposely bringing people into the fold, and you give them a nice lead magnet and get them to opt into your list, and you're building your own community. You're building your audience, but you're doing that by doing effective and strategic outreach. You're going out and getting onto people's podcasts. You're running Facebook ads for different lead magnets. And you're doing all these things that bring people in, and you're just building this audience. You're building this email list, but you're doing it with that strategy in mind that you are planning a full-scale product launch at some point in the future. Okay? So that's times when launches are good. Now, launches are not bad, but I do want you to think a little longer term here. This is the other side of it is do you need to plan out a product launch? The answer could be no, because you're going to concentrate on the long game rather than that short spurt. And that is by building a sales funnel that concentrates on evergreen sales that come in on a routine basis. It's not going to be at a sexy level of volume. You're not going to get that huge, multi-$1,000 day. And I mean, unless you've got the audience and the ads for that, of course. But, I'll take slow and steady anytime over a big hit. I just will, because slow and steady is something that you can build upon over time. You can perfect your game, you can make it better, and you can speed it up, and you'll make more money over time. I guarantee it. This is kind of the way the Blog Marketing Academy works. I occasionally do little promotions to my list. In fact, as I'm recording this episode, I'm coming off the Black Friday membership drive, and it did really, really well. But aside from those one-off promotions that I run occasionally, the Blog Marketing Academy runs on an evergreen basis. I don't do a lot of deadline-based promotions. It tends to generate most of its sales slow and steady with the funnels that I have in place, and they just run, and sales are coming in every single day. That's the way you should be trying to build it, instead of concentrating on building up the crack kit thing that I was talking about earlier. Now, the way that you go about doing this is to concentrate on building what I call the blog profit funnel. This is the very basis of the Blog Monetization Lab itself at blogmonetizationlab.com, is how to build this funnel behind your site. And yes, it's basically a sales funnel. Now, the way that you build it is one step at a time, okay? First, you're going to start out with that lead magnet, that squeeze page. You're going to go out there and you're going to start getting leads in whatever way you need to do that. It could be Facebook ads. It could be via your blog, what have you. And then you concentrate on the next step in the funnel, which is going to typically be your front-end offer. Now, another way that you can go is to set up a launch sequence after they opt in. So people opt in for a lead magnet, and then they're going to get 1 to 2, maybe 3 videos that go in a particular sequence. And you're going to deliver it via email using your autoresponder, and it will be delivered to them over the course of a few days or maybe a week or something like that. But it all leads up to a sale. You're building that relationship with them over this launch sequence, and you're building them up, building up some anticipation for something. You're making them very aware of the problem that they're experiencing. You're positioning yourself as an authority, as somebody who could help them solve this, and you're building that relationship so that they can actually trust you. And then all that leads up to making an offer for them to take the next step with you. And that is essentially the way a product launch works. It's just that you're putting it on automatic. Now, when it comes to the point of the sale, you sell it just like you would anything else. Now, any good product launch has a deadline, and you've got to have that deadline, and you can most certainly do it even though your launch is running on automatic. Every single person who's going through that launch sequence is going to have their own deadline. It's not going to be one that you have to set globally for everybody, because everybody comes in at it at a different time. And so there are tools out there that you can use, and one of my favorites right now that I'm using is called Deadline Funnel. And if it's not a free product, in fact, it's a recurring billing thing. It's a third-party service, but that's one reason why it works so well. There are systems out there that will work on top of WordPress as a plugin and stuff like that. And they work, but they're a little bit more problematic sometimes. Deadline Funnel is great because you can have the person's individual deadline mentioned in the email as a custom field. You can have timers that will actually work inside of the email, which I actually used for my last promotion, and it worked out really well. I mean, there's literally a countdown timer in the email. Of course, you could put those things on the screen as well. A number of very flexible options with that tool, and that's Deadline Funnel, and it's a really great tool for doing evergreen launches and concentrating on the long game rather than that short spurt. Okay, great thing that you can do. Another thing that I want you to keep in mind as a strategy is to take the launch model and simply shorten it. Simply take, you don't need to go out and do a 3-video series and all this stuff like you see some people do. You can shorten the runway by concentrating on one thing, and that's a webinar. Just all you're doing is you're going out and you're running ads and go to your list, and the whole thing is get onto this webinar. And then that is where you make your offer at the end of it. And it's a great way to take the whole launch process and you're basically compressing it into one event rather than this drawn out thing that goes over the course of a week or two. Okay. So webinars are a great way to do that. And they convert really, really well, actually, if you do them right. And again, because it's an evergreen model, don't expect to knock it out of the park right away. You can perfect it over time. You just sit back and you watch your numbers, you watch your conversion rates, and you make little tweaks and you change it over time, and you'll get better at it. And it can take you many months to tweak it, maybe even longer than that, but sales just get better over time. And to me, again, I'll take slow and steady over the big spurt anytime because I can grow the slow and steady. I can depend on it. I can pay my bills on it. I'm not going to be worried about paying my bills in the future because the business is always generating dependable revenue. Okay? So that's how that works. Hopefully, maybe got some ideas or a little insight into kind of how it works. Many of the details that we talked about here are stuff that we're going to talk about in future episodes of Coffee Break Blogging. So if you're not actively subscribed to this podcast and getting all episodes downloaded automatically, be sure to do that. Multiple subscription options that you can find over at coffeebreakblogging.com. I'll end off by again reminding you about the Blog Monetization Lab at blogmonetizationlab.com, because a lot of what we just talked about is either covered in the lab now or will be in the not too distant future. The whole model, the whole funnel setup is already there. Now, some of the specifics like a launch and doing webinars, these are all things that are on my short list of new action plans that I'm going to be creating for my lab members. So if you want to get started on this now, you can ask questions on it now. You don't have to wait for me to come up with an action plan in order to make some headway on this. You can just simply ask, and there's multiple ways that you can do that as a lab member. But if you also want to have everything secured and you're ready to go for when those action plans do come out, then head on over to blogmonetizationlab.com and join us today. And I think you're going to find this to be a good move for your growth in the future with your business. Okay? Thanks so much for listening, and I will see you next time at Coffee Break Blogging. Thanks for listening to this episode of Coffee Break Blogging. If you like what you heard here today, we have something awesome we'd love to send you. It's called the Blog Conversion Guide, and it has 9 tweaks you can make to your blog in order to increase your conversion rate to get more opt-ins and sales. As one of our listeners, we'd love to give you access to this guide absolutely free. You can get your copy right now by going to coffeebreakblogging.com. Again, go to coffeebreakblogging.com to get your copy, and we'll see you next time.